I love giving furniture a new life, and a really easy way to do that is by chalk painting, plus it looks really cool. So in this chapter, I'm gonna show you how to chalk paint a piece of furniture. I've definitely been known to pull over on the side of the road and pick up a piece of furniture that has a great shape. This piece of furniture fits my space perfectly, but I don't love the finish. And chalk paint is such a great way to refinish a piece of furniture because it has very little prep. You don't have to sand this, you don't have to do a lot. I like to just clean it and then you can paint it. And if you're wondering a little bit more about what chalk paint is, the reason it's called that is not because it's chalkboard paint that you can draw on. It's actually chalk paint because it has a chalky finish. And it gives a really matte look, which I love. It just looks very sleek. If you want to paint something black, it'll be more modern. If you want to do a white with a distressed edge, that can go with a more farmhouse style. It really translates to any look that you have going in your house. Today we're gonna do a really pretty green on this, and I'm just gonna do it straightforward, no antiquing, just because I really want that kind of boho vibe for this desk. I'm gonna quick clean it, take off the hardware, and then do 2 coats of paint, and then do new hardware. The supplies we'll need for this project is something to clean the desk. I like to use TSP. It's a heavy duty cleaner and deglosser, and a rag. And then we'll need the paint, the chalk paint. I'm gonna use a pretty sage today, but you can use any color. The sealant to go on the top, a screwdriver to take off the hardware, a couple of brushes. I like to use a big brush for the surface and these artist brush for the details. Some hardware, your paint tray, and then your piece of furniture. I'm gonna use a desk, but you can use any piece of furniture. Let's get into it. I find that thrift store furniture can have a lot of grime on it, so I like to give it a good cleaning. I also pick up a lot of furniture on the side of the road, so that has a little bit of dirt on it. I like to use this degreaser and deglosser. So if you do have a surface that's a little glossier, this will help take that shine away and the paint can adhere to it better. Another reason I love chalk paint is sanding something like this would take a long time just to get into all these grooves. So instead of sanding it, I can paint it. So this is pretty clean now. I'm just gonna take off the hardware. I'm actually gonna replace these front knobs. So I'm gonna take these off and oh wow, this is fun. So I'm gonna take these off. I think I'm actually gonna paint over this so the entire piece is green, just because I want a little bit more modern look going in this house, but it's a very fun detail. And then for the rest of the hardware, I'm just gonna paint around it using an artist brush. But if you don't quite feel confident or have a steady hand, you can always tape off the rest of the hardware too. Now we can start painting. I like to use a brush for a project like this. I'll show you it on the top because then you can really see the brush strokes and it looks a little bit more hand painted. You could roll it, but I don't really like the texture that comes along with that, but it's totally up to you. Another reason I really like using chalk paint is it's thicker, so you don't get as many drips, which is really nice when you're painting furniture. Without doubt, I get some paint on me, but that's how it goes. It's all part of the DIY process. And you don't have to worry about getting complete coverage on the first go because you'll go back and do a second coat. And you don't want to overwork the paint because you'll start pulling it up. So just do long strokes and get as much coverage as you can on the first coat. And then we'll come in and fill in any gaps on the second coat. I like to use an artist brush for some of these details just because it's a thicker paint, so it can get really gloppy, which I'm not sure if that's a word, but it feels right. I'm gonna paint the inside now, and I'm just gonna go right over this treatment. You can paint chalk paint on any surface, so This should stick to this just fine. And then I'll use an artist brush just to go around that hardware because I'm not taking it off, but you can always take it off. This might be a veneer. Veneer's perfect for a project like this because it's not wood that you'd want to salvage, so paint right over it. Actually, if you find a veneer piece that looks really new and is in bad shape, chalk paint can make it look more like an antique, especially if you rough it up a little bit after you paint it. You can use some sandpaper on the edges. When you are using a paintbrush, sometimes you will see some of the paint strokes, so make sure that you're not painting in all different directions, trying to keep it smooth and going in one direction. So I'm just finishing off some of the details on the leg, and you can see that the top is almost completely dry, so it only takes about 15 minutes to dry. I will say I did try to go back and patch a place that I had a drip. You shouldn't do that. Wait for it to completely dry, and then you can sand it down and do the second coat. So in the meantime, I'll work on painting the second coat on the back. So you can see right here, I didn't get full coverage on the first time, and that's okay because the second coat will cover that all up. Chalk paint is really opaque, so whatever's behind it will be completely covered up. If you want to go for a more shabby chic look, you could just do one layer and let some of the wood show through, but I'm going for a little more modern look on this piece. This was that little blemish that I tried to cover up. It's dry now, so I'm just gonna sand it. And you might take off a little bit of paint, but it's flat, and then I can go back over it. And the second coat should cover it right up. Ta-da! All right, the second coat is dry, so now I'm gonna put on the hardware. I got these cute little brass knobs. Not totally different than the ones that were here, just a little updated. And then I'm just gonna tighten it with a screwdriver. If you do have a piece at home that's looking a little dated, it's amazing how much hardware can update it. How cute's that? I really like the brass against this color. For the last step, I'm gonna put a sealant just on this top part because I plan on putting flowers and there might be some water that drips and you just wanna protect the chalk paint. I'm just gonna use a sponge brush for this and it goes on a little milky, but it will dry totally clear. And this will just help protect it. If you're doing something like a coffee table or a dining room table, I'd usually do a sealant, just if it's gonna get wet at all or you wanna clean it. I usually like to do 2 coats just to make sure that it is sealed. Once the second coat is dry, our project will be done. The desk is in place, it looks so good. It wasn't the right wood color, but now it looks so good in this pretty sage color. In this chapter, I showed you how to take a piece of furniture and clean it and paint it with chalk paint. I can't wait to see what furniture you refinish.